Hello YouTube, this is Hunter Surge here with another Firestorm deck profile. Today we're going to continue with breaking down the decks that you can build off of the star decks with Bears, Majursa. Have to get this one out relatively early because once Josh puts his out, it'll be everyone else's will be irrelevant. So let's get into it. All right, and here's the main deck. So this is gonna be a bit different from our usual fare because there's a few things like there's a lot of like tech options that you can do with bears, different ways of building it that I do want to discuss. This is really like a baseline, and like there's a bunch of modifications you can go from there. That's the idea with the build I'm showing you at this very moment. So bear ratio, very simple. Let's go over the basic cards for those unfamiliar. So there's like 7, 8, 9 different bear Elestrals at this point, but there's only so many good ones. The good ones are in fire, we have Ursier. This is a 3/1 that when it destroys an Elestral in battle, you can special cast a 1 spirit bear Elestral from your hand or deck. Very similar to Viscerus, but it can cast it in attack. So that next Elestral can then swing in. And beat over something else. If you cast out another Ursier, summon out something else, yada yada yada. Then we've got Ursicle, very important for starting off the deck. Ursicle is a 1/3 Frost Celestial that when you normal cast it, so it won't get this effect when you special cast off Ursier. Very important to note. When you normal cast it, you get to search your deck for any Ursa subclass, Elestral, or Rune. So all of the support runes that the deck has gotten are have the Ursa subclass. You can see it right down here on Hibernation, right down here on Don't Poke, and right down here on Ursaden. So Ursicle can search more than searching any of your Elestrals. You're most commonly going to be searching one of these 3 cards with when you cast out an Ursicle because you're trying to get together your big combo, right? Or you're trying to get yourself some kind of rune protection in the form of Don't Poke. Either is really good. And then we have Abomin Ursa. This is a 1-of typically. This is a 3/1 Frost Elestral. And it gets +2 attack for each other bear Elestral on your field. So the idea with Abomin Ursa typically is you're going to go, okay, Ursier is going to beat over something. And then it's either going to cast out an Ursier that's going to beat over something else, or it's going to cast out an Abomin Ursa. But if you cast out another Ursier when it beats over something, you're gonna eventually in your Ursier chain, you're going to typically end on casting out an Abomin Ursa that is going to be sitting on 5 or 7 attack. Can't be cryoblasted because it's a Frost Celestial. Very annoying for our opponent to deal with. That is the role of Abomin Ursa. But like on its own, it's not very good. But it's very good as a cast off of Ursier at the end of your Ursier chain. And then our last bear Elestral is the new Majursa Champion of Hestia. This is the 8/13, very large. It has 2 effects, only one of them matters. So its first effect is when you cast it, you can target and destroy cards up to the number of bear Elestrals on your field. So how are we getting out this big 3 cost? Very simple. We have this Stadium Rune, Ursaden, which is a fire and a frost, and Ursa Elestrals get +1 attack and +1 defense, and when a player casts an Ursa Elestral, you can enchant any spirit to your from your spirit deck to your Ursaden. You can disenchant 4 of any spirit from this Ursaden in order to special cast an Ursa Elestral from your hand or deck. So you're going to load this up with 4, and then you're going to special cast a Majursa from your deck. Then you're going to blow up like 2 or 3 cards. But the other problem, there were 2 problems Ursaden had before, because this is a Frostfall card. Bear in mind, this is a decently old card. This big burst play of Ursaden has existed before. It had 2 problems. One, the 3-cost bears were not very good. They didn't really do anything, so they weren't worth the payoff. Well, that issue is solved. The other problem is that it's decently slow and it's very expensive because, like, okay, you play this out for 2. You cast out another bear for 1. You enchant another onto the Ursaden. You cast out another bear. You enchant another onto the Ursaden. Then you disenchant 4 from the Ursaden, and you pay 3 to cast the big 3 cost from your deck. So we have spent 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for a 9 spirits for a play that gets outed by a boom bat, or a PTA or a shield. Shield is not so much an issue now because Majersa just pops it. But it was way too expensive. Well, that's where one of the other new pieces of support, Hibernation, comes in. This is a 1 Frost Invoke rune that can only be played if you control an Ursa Elestral. You target up to 2 Fire or Frost spirits in your underworld, return them to your spirit deck, or enchant them to your Ursa Den. If you do, draw a card. So this lets you immediately load up the Ursa Den with the 2 extra spirits it requires. And then we can pop off, summon out the Majersa, pop 2 or 3 things, and now we have a big 8-13 on our board that is very difficult for our opponent to deal with. And notably that cards like Galaxy don't help your opponent deal with. That is the basic combo of the deck and what we are trying to achieve. The other power play we of course have is Ursir stuff, and we also have the very powerful counter rune, Don't Poke the Bear. This is 1 fire counter rune that can only be cast during the battle phase, and it targets an Ursa Elestral and gives it +4 attack, +4 defense until the end phase. Very, very strong card, and if we use it on Ursir exactly, it's even better. So these are some very powerful support tools. However, as discussed, the other Ursa Elestrals aren't very good, so we can't exactly just fill our decks up with them. And also, you may notice a bit of a problem with the 1-cost Ursa Elestrals in that they're not very large. They're not very big boys. That can be a bit of an issue. So how do we supplement this deck? Well, we're in fire already, so we've got to have the Lavalith. Lavalith is just extremely powerful, so we're just always going to slot in the Lavalith since we're on fire already. Then we have the classic Astrabbit 2/5 on receive of the Thunder. You look at top 3, put one of them into your hand, and shuffle your deck. Very good starter. Then we have a bunch of Water Elestrals. So we have 2 copies of Narpoon. This is a 4/3 1 Water Elestral that you're probably going to see a lot of throughout Firestorm because there's a lot of good Frost stuff to be searching. On normal cast, you get to search your deck for a 1 Spirit Frost Elestral and add to your hand. This basically lets us have extra copies of Ursicle, since Ursicle is what is going to be assembling our combo pieces. And then we have 3 Galaxy and 3 Eddy. Galaxy Champion of Poseidon is a 2/5 that when it receives a water, swaps the stats of every Elestral on the field. And Eddy is a 4/1 1 Water Spirit Elestral that on cast changes the position of an Elestral on the field. I have opted for both of these because Galaxy tends to be better independently into this format. Doesn't lose to like Astrabbit Argo or Astrabbit Tsunami, stuff like that. Can potentially crash into Leica Void. Beats Titano Strike and Bunnix, stuff like that. But it's a bit weird with bears exactly because let's say you already have an Ursir established and you want to set yourself up to be able to go Ursir beat over something and cast out another bear. If you cast out Galaxy and use Galaxy's effect, Ursir will now be 1 attack and won't be beating over anything. Won't be beating over anything in the game. It will at best be crashing. So that's not particularly great. So we also have the Eddies in here, since the Eddy does work well alongside the Ursir, because if we have the Ursir out already, we cast out the Eddy, we switch the position of the opponent's Elestral, and most Elestrals have a stat that is 2 or less, so Ursir will be able to beat over that. We also have 2 Ambrosias as additional healing on top of the Hibernations. I kind of think you don't really need Ambrosias in this deck, but as like a baseline, I think it was important to include Ambrosias at the very least. Rise from the Ashes. So this is recently limited, which has the weird effect of making players a lot more comfortable with fitting in a copy into their decks. Rise from the Ashes is kind of crazy with Majersa. If you go for a Majersa line early, and you have Rise later in the game, you can go Rise, cast out Majersa from your Underworld, and notably, Majersa's effect is just on cast. So you get the pop effect off the Rise, without having to go through the big combo again, assemble the big combo. You just go through it once and then go, okay, I'm gonna rise now. You dealt with it. Okay, I'm gonna rise now, late in the game when you probably don't have the resources to deal with another Majursa. GG. We have one Earthquake. Earthquake feels a bit weird here because we have such good removal in the form of Majursa. But Like a Void is a Like a Void, and you really want to be able to out that turn one if it drops down. So you know. Even though Bears has a pretty like convincing out to Like a Void that we will be talking about, you still, the turn one Like a Void is still pretty taxing for the deck to be able to put out a convincing answer for. So having the one Earthquake, I feel, is still pretty important. And then for the counter runes, we have 3 Gorgon's Gaze, 3 Shield of Achilles, 3 Don't Poke, 3 Tsunami. Bears as a deck really likes Tsunami because Ursier is not very large, right? But it can't beat over most things that are in defense. So you really like being able to go flip up Tsunami to stop your opponent's attack, put their thing in defense, then run out an Ursier, swing over it, and cast out another bear. That is pretty nice. Now, as I mentioned, and also we have 3 shield to round out the counter rune lineup. Now, as mentioned, this deck has a pretty convincing out to the Champion Like a Void board. So, like, the Champion Like a Void board is, of course, the Champion Like a Void, 6/5, with 2 Werepups, 3/2s, right? So, if you have Ursaden and Ursier, you play the Ursaden, you play out the Ursier. Ursaden is giving a +1/+1 buff to the Ursier. So, there's a 4/2, beats over a pup. You cast out another Ursier, beats over the other pup, cast out the Abominursa. There are 2 other bears on the field, so this is currently a 8 attacker, beats over the Like a Void. Now, of course, this loses to any back row. And Hurricane feels weird in the main board of bears. So for that reason, in this main board, I do not have the extra copies of Ursaden. You would want to make that super reliable to be able to run out into a turn 1 Like a Void. Turn 1 pup. Either or, really. But that is one of those things to consider. And we'll be talking about a lot of tech options after we go through the Spirit deck. But let's go through the Spirit deck first. Then we'll talk about all of that. And here is our Spirit deck. So very basic stuff here. So we have the 2 Earths for the Earthquakes. We have 2 Thunders as a bare minimum to make Ash Rabbit work. We don't really need that many Frosts. We have the Hibernations, the Ursicles, and the 1 for Ursaden. That's not a very high Frost requirement, so 4 is more than enough. I do tend to err on the side of caution in this deck, go like 4 instead of 3 because of Hibernation, and Hibernation being a heal card that we want to be able to keep live. But I don't feel... we also have the Abominers. But like 4 feels comfortable. We have a lot of water stuff in here between the Tsunamis, the Narpoons, the Galaxies, and the Eddies. So we're up at 5 waters, and then the rest is the fire stuff. The rest is 7 fires. We need that for like all of our big plays. Our Majursa, Ursaden requires it. Lavalith, Don't Poke as well. So lots of fires needed. But this Spirit Math has felt pretty comfortable with this list, though depending on how you end up building the deck, you may want to adjust the exact Spirit Math. Now, let's get into some tech discussion. Now, number 1 is, of course, extra copies of Ursaden, because of the aforementioned Ursier into Like a Void stuff. Now, moving on from that, I do think if you are aiming for that kind of stuff, aiming for that Like a Void out, Hurricane somewhere in the main or side makes a lot of sense. At like 2 or 3 copies, because if they have a single back row, that play line doesn't work. Now later in the game, you also have Don't Poke to enable that. But Hurricane just generally feels weird here because of the fact that that the Majursa play is still pretty expensive, and also it's going to clear out back row anyways. If you get that play, that clears the Like a Void board anyways. So like the other thing with going up to 3 Ursaden is it makes getting out the combo quickly much more consistent because you're very likely to open with one of either Ursaden or Hibernation, and then like finding the Ursicle for the other is not that difficult. Um, so that's important to bear in mind. Now, not really a bear's tech, but like I just want to draw attention to the fact that Pandora's Box is uniquely a good out to Ursaden if you're struggling with it. Hey, you might want to be able to out the other bear players. Because Ursaden disenchants the 4 for cost and then goes to search the deck to cast something out. You flip Pandora's Box, you pay 2. The Ursaden is going to leave the field because it's now under enchanted and they don't get their big bear. So that can just completely host that line. And for that reason, post side, you might also want Hurricane to get rid of Pandora's Box and stop them from being able to stop your big push. Now, for other like deck variants, something that is worth considering is Argo. Gives you more combat tricks, helps deal with your low stat lines, and there's some other reasons that you may want to consider Argo in bears. Now, if you are running Argo, you of course want the necklace, and Firestorm gives us 2 really nice options as the secondary artifact. Torch is in element and gives +2 attack, and only costs 1 spirit. So it's nice as a cheap alternative when we don't really need that much. Liar requires us to dip into solar, but swaps the stats of something, which is very powerful, very nice. Now, if you're on Argo stuff, then you can start considering some other options, predominantly Kinleo and Smoltuga. Kinleo, I don't like a lot in like standard variations of the deck, but if you're going on artifact stuff with Argo, you have a lot more Nexus banks, so Kinleo is live a lot more often. And I don't particularly like Kinleo Nexus off of Ursaden because you pay 2 for the Ursaden, and you're only getting 1 spirit off the Ursaden. So unless you've found one of the ways to get extra spirits on the Ursaden, using that as a Nexus bank does not feel super great. But if you have the artifact package as a way to have Nexus banks, then Kinleo feels a lot better. And if Kinleo's in the deck, then Smoltuga as an option makes a lot more sense because then you have both Kinleo and Ursir as really good search targets. Another thing worth considering, this is a variant that saw some success in the PNM, is bears using like a bunch of fire artifact stuff. You were using the Hephaestus, the Valkyries. You would Nexus over, and you could Nexus over to the Ursaden using Kinleo, and get it set up that way. So that's another option that you can go to. There's a lot of different stuff that you can do with a bears deck that I would bear in mind for consideration. And as I said, I really don't think that these 2 Ambrosias are strictly necessary in this deck. I think Hibernation fills that role well enough as is. So I think if you're trying to find things to cut from this base list I've given you, like Ambrosia is a good place to start. If you're putting in stuff like Kinleo and Smoltuga, you obviously want to cut the Narpoons most likely, and some of these water guys you would want to be cutting. Because you're bringing in some other guys that are good, and especially like Kinleo functions as a removal guy, which is pretty nice, and don't really need the position change / stat swap guys on top of that. If you're putting in Argo, you can probably like cut down on some of the counter runes, most likely like a shield or something. And what else to mention here? Oh yeah, and the Rise. Rise is super cuttable, obviously. It is just like a fun of tech. But it is a very powerful fun of tech. So like always bear that in mind. But like I don't expect topping this of bears to necessarily be running the Rise. But that could end up happening because like that that play when you draw it, it's such a bomb card if you've already resolved the Majursa, or like even a Lavalith. Even getting to Rise a Lavalith is pretty powerful. But that's going to be it for bears. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Oh, I almost forgot. I have an official affiliate code. Link is in the description. If you're buying things from the official Shop Elestrals store, I would appreciate if you used my affiliate code. And with that said, this is Hunter Surge, signing off.